My Name Is Loh Kiwan is a drama about a North Korean defector who initially fled to China, but after getting into some trouble, he finds himself escaping once more and looking for refuge in Belgium with nothing more than a wallet containing blood-stained money. However, his arrival in Belgium is met with more hardships as the process for citizenship is not as quick as he hoped, and without speaking the language or having a place to stay, Loh Kiwan has no choice but to survive on the streets. It's a pretty bleak premise to say the least, and initially it's approached somewhat ambiguously as the very first scene depicts this man attempting to wash blood off of the road. We're unsure of the context, but it's clear that he's completely deflated by his current situation, and not long after, we'll join him as he lands in unknown territory and attempts to settle into this harsh environment, as the movie quickly lays the foundation before taking its time to slowly introduce Loh Kiwan and focus more on his endurance and adaptability, which I think offers enough to get invested in this character and his story, even if the movie hasn't really personified him just yet. It isn't until he finds himself in the presence of Marie, a troubled Korean woman who steals his wallet while he was sleeping, that we get to see him display a bit more of his humanity despite his unpleasant circumstances. And because of their encounter, it will soon begin to expand his horizons with the potential for a more hopeful outlook, which allows the direction to slightly shift in a way that opens the door to a more uplifting nature that offers a handful of touching and heartfelt moments, as well as the opportunity to learn more about Loh Kiwan through some tender flashbacks. That being said, the movie does remain consistently bleak in tone for the most part, as there's still a number of obstacles for Loh Kiwan to overcome. And as an extension, the movie also diverts from his story at times to focus on Marie and what she's got going on in her life, as the movie gradually develops to bring these two together in a way that allows them to support each other. And in general, it is a nice idea, and I think that aspect and Marie's presence in his story works pretty well. But when it comes to Marie's story, there are some instances that took me out of the movie at times because it feels rather disconnected from everything else. For example, her struggles have led her to having some ties to a group of gangsters, I guess, and she ends up having to partake in this high-stakes underground shooting contest in a movie that is primarily grounded in reality and serious with its tone and direction. Of course, this aspect does have a purpose in exploring her character and backstory, but I can't help but feel like some of these scenes are a bit silly and cartoonish in contrast and comparison to everything else the movie has to offer. And I feel like the same ideas could have still been explored without this extra crime setting. To make things worse, these gangster scenes amount to around 20 minutes of the runtime, even though they're fairly spread apart. But in a movie that's over 2 hours long, I think it's a pretty careless usage of time. And I say that because I feel like the final act of the movie felt incredibly rushed, especially because the pace in general is somewhat slow but nicely maintained. And then, all of a sudden, during the last 40-ish minutes, it's like we're fast-forwarding through significant development to the point where the ending destination didn't feel as impactful as it should have been after spending around 2 hours watching Loh Kiwan persevere. So I think if you were to remove this gangster subplot entirely and use that time to focus on other aspects of the movie to balance out the final act, then it would have improved the movie as a whole greatly. Apart from that, I'd still say it's a pretty good drama overall, and while there are a couple of other instances that felt a bit forceful in its execution, it generally gets the point across just fine, and I typically still liked the sentiment that comes with some of these ideas. I think it's also easy enough to overlook some of these criticisms because of how good the performances are. Like I mentioned earlier, it takes a bit of time to properly introduce and build up Loh Kiwan as a character, but because of how Song Joong-Ki composes himself and performs as this character, I didn't really need to know anything about Loh Kiwan to be invested in his journey. And then, when I did learn more, it felt earnest in how it comes across, and I was further saddened and touched by his story, in large part because of the performance from Song Joong-Ki. Similarly, when it comes to Marie, even though I think the movie could have better implemented this character and her story, I thought Choi Sung-Eun did a great job with her performance as well, especially when she conveys the more vulnerable and fragile side to her character, and I felt like she performed at her best when she was opposite Song Joong-Ki, as the movie does develop a solid chemistry between the two. I also thought the supporting cast was very strong, with actors like Kim Sung-Ryung, Hyun-Woo, Lee Sang-Hee, and Han-Chul. And while they don't get a lot of screen time, they really know how to perform to the best of their abilities to make their limited screen time all the more effective. And there are some incredible scenes that stand out even more because of just how good their performances are. So with that in mind, I'd say the performances were what captivated me the most and kept me engaged. But there's also quite a few good qualities driving the movie forward, alongside Kim Hee-Jin's general approach and direction that keeps things interesting and delivers a worthwhile character to follow in Loh Kiwan. And even though I wasn't a big fan of the rapid development in the final act, I still liked part of the direction and the significance of the ending. So, criticisms aside, I would recommend watching this movie, especially if you're a fan of Song Joong-Ki. And it's also a rare instance where Netflix has actually acquired a pretty good Korean movie for their platform, so maybe it's worth checking out for that alone.